the new god of the Corruptedest, the new gods of the Corruptedest, the new god of the Corruptedest, the new goddess of the Corruptedest, the new goddesses of the Corruptedest, the new goddess of the Corruptedest, the old god of the Corruptedest, the old gods of the Corruptedest, the old god of the Corruptedest, the old goddess of the Corruptedest, the old goddesses of the Corruptedest, the old goddess of the Corruptedest, the greater god of the Corruptedest, the greater gods of the Corruptedest, the greater god of the Corruptedest, the greater goddess of the Corruptedest, the greater goddesses of the Corruptedest, the greater goddess of the Corruptedest, the lesser god of the Corruptedest, the lesser gods of the Corruptedest, the lesser god of the Corruptedest, the lesser goddess of the Corruptedest, the lesser goddesses of the Corruptedest, the lesser goddess of the Corruptedest, the higher god of the Corruptedest, the higher gods of the Corruptedest, the higher god of the Corruptedest, the higher goddess of the Corruptedest, the higher goddesses of the Corruptedest, the higher goddess of the Corruptedest, the lower god of the Corruptedest, the lower gods of the Corruptedest, the lower god of the Corruptedest, the lower goddess of the Corruptedest, the lower goddesses of the Corruptedest, the lower goddess of the Corruptedest, the greater spirit of the Corruptedest, the greater spirits of the Corruptedest, the greater spirit of the Corruptedest, the lesser spirit of the Corruptedest, the lesser spirits of the Corruptedest, the lesser spirit of the Corruptedest, the higher spirit of the Corruptedest, the higher spirits of the Corruptedest, the higher spirit of the Corruptedest, the lower spirit of the Corruptedest, the lower spirits of the Corruptedest, the lower spirit of the Corruptedest, the major god of the Corruptedest, the major gods of the Corruptedest, the major god of the Corruptedest, the major goddess of the Corruptedest, the major goddesses of the Corruptedest, the major goddess of the Corruptedest, the minor god of the Corruptedest, the minor gods of the Corruptedest, the minor god of the Corruptedest, the minor goddess of the Corruptedest, the minor goddesses of the Corruptedest, the minor goddess of the Corruptedest, the superior god of the Corruptedest, the superior gods of the Corruptedest, the superior god of the Corruptedest, the superior goddess of the Corruptedest, the superior goddesses of the Corruptedest, the superior goddess of the Corruptedest, the inferior god of the Corruptedest, the inferior gods of the Corruptedest, the inferior god of the Corruptedest, the inferior goddess of the Corruptedest, the inferior goddesses of the Corruptedest, the inferior goddess of the Corruptedest, the ancestor god of the Corruptedest, the ancestor gods of the Corruptedest, the ancestor god of the Corruptedest, the ancestor goddess of the Corruptedest, the ancestor goddesses of the Corruptedest, the ancestor goddess of the Corruptedest, the ascendant god of the Corruptedest, the ascendant gods of the Corruptedest, the ascendant god of the Corruptedest, the ascendant goddess of the Corruptedest, the ascendant goddesses of the Corruptedest, the ascendant goddess of the Corruptedest, the descendant god of the Corruptedest, the descendant gods of the Corruptedest, the descendant god of the Corruptedest, the descendant goddess of the Corruptedest, the descendant goddesses of the Corruptedest, the descendant goddess of the Corruptedest, the transcendent god of the Corruptedest, the transcendent gods of the Corruptedest, the transcendent god of the Corruptedest, the transcendent goddess of the Corruptedest, the transcendent goddesses of the Corruptedest, the transcendent goddess of the Corruptedest, the past god of the Corruptedest, the past gods of the Corruptedest, the past god of the Corruptedest, the past goddess of the Corruptedest, the past goddesses of the Corruptedest, the past goddess of the Corruptedest, the present god of the Corruptedest, the present gods of the Corruptedest, the present god of the Corruptedest, the present goddess of the Corruptedest, the present goddesses of the Corruptedest, the present goddess of the Corruptedest, the future god of the Corruptedest, the future gods of the Corruptedest, the future god of the Corruptedest, the future goddess of the Corruptedest, The future goddesses of the Corruptedest. The future goddess of the Corruptedest. The authentic god of the Corruptedest. The authentic gods of the Corruptedest. The authentic god of the Corruptedest. The authentic goddess of the Corruptedest. The authentic goddesses of the Corruptedest. The authentic goddess of the Corruptedest. The synthetic god of the Corruptedest. The synthetic gods of the Corruptedest. The synthetic god of the Corruptedest. The synthetic goddess of the Corruptedest. The synthetic goddesses of the Corruptedest. The synthetic goddess of the Corruptedest. The progressive god of the Corruptedest. The progressive gods of the Corruptedest. The progressive god of the Corruptedest. The progressive goddess of the Corruptedest. The progressive goddesses of the Corruptedest. The progressive goddess of the Corruptedest. The regressive god of the Corruptedest. The regressive gods of the Corruptedest. The regressive god of the Corruptedest. The regressive goddess of the Corruptedest. The regressive goddesses of the Corruptedest. The regressive goddess of the Corruptedest. The ordinary god of the Corruptedest. The ordinary gods of the Corruptedest. The ordinary god of the Corruptedest. The ordinary goddess of the Corruptedest. The ordinary goddesses of the Corruptedest. The ordinary goddess of the Corruptedest. The extraordinary god of the Corruptedest. The extraordinary gods of the Corruptedest. The extraordinary god of the Corruptedest. The extraordinary goddess of the Corruptedest. The extraordinary goddesses of the Corruptedest. The extraordinary goddess of the Corruptedest. The static god of the Corruptedest. The static gods of the Corruptedest. The static god of the Corruptedest. The static goddess of the Corruptedest. The static goddesses of the Corruptedest. The static goddess of the Corruptedest. The dynamic god of the Corruptedest. The dynamic gods of the Corruptedest. The dynamic god of the Corruptedest. The dynamic goddess of the Corruptedest. The dynamic goddesses of the Corruptedest. The dynamic goddess of the Corruptedest. The land god of the Corruptedest. The land gods of the Corruptedest. The land god of the Corruptedest. The land goddess of the Corruptedest. The land goddesses of the Corruptedest. The land goddess of the Corruptedest. The sea god of the Corruptedest. The sea gods of the Corruptedest. The sea god of the Corruptedest. The sea goddess of the Corruptedest. The sea goddesses of the Corruptedest. The sea goddess of the Corruptedest. The sky god of the Corruptedest. The sky gods of the Corruptedest. The sky god of the Corruptedest. The sky goddess of the Corruptedest. The sky goddesses of the Corruptedest. The sky goddess of the Corruptedest. The god of the Corruptedest. The gods of the Corruptedest. The god of the Corruptedest. The goddess of the Corruptedest. The goddesses of the Corruptedest. The goddess of the Corruptedest. The half-god of the Corruptedest. The half-gods of the Corruptedest. The half-god of the Corruptedest. The half-goddess of the Corruptedest. The half-goddesses of the Corruptedest. The half-goddess of the Corruptedest. The vessel of the Corruptedest. The vessels of the Corruptedest. The vessel of the Corruptedest. The name of the Corruptedest. The names of the Corruptedest. The name of the Corruptedest. The person of the Corruptedest. The persons of the Corruptedest. The person of the Corruptedest. The persona of the Corruptedest. The personas of the Corruptedest. The persona of the Corruptedest. The personage of the Corruptedest. The personages of the Corruptedest. The personage of the Corruptedest. The personality of the Corruptedest. The personalities of the Corruptedest. The personality of the Corruptedest. The personification of the Corruptedest. The personifications of the Corruptedest. The personification of the Corruptedest. The image of the Corruptedest. The images of the Corruptedest. The image of the Corruptedest. The imagination of the Corruptedest. The imaginations of the Corruptedest. The imagination of the Corruptedest. The belief of the Corruptedest. The beliefs of the Corruptedest. The belief of the Corruptedest. The thought of the Corruptedest. The thoughts of the Corruptedest. The thought of the Corruptedest. The word of the Corruptedest. The words of the Corruptedest. The word of the Corruptedest. The action of the Corruptedest. The actions of the Corruptedest. The action of the Corruptedest. The reaction of the Corruptedest. The reactions of the Corruptedest. The reaction of the Corruptedest. The feeling of the Corruptedest. The feelings of the Corruptedest. The feeling of the Corruptedest. The situation of the Corruptedest. The situations of the Corruptedest. The situation of the Corruptedest. The circumstance of the Corruptedest. The circumstances of the Corruptedest. The circumstance of the Corruptedest. The environment of the Corruptedest. The environments of the Corruptedest. The environment of the Corruptedest. The relationship of the Corruptedest. The relationships of the Corruptedest. The relationship of the Corruptedest. The number of the Corruptedest. The numbers of the Corruptedest. The number of the Corruptedest. The formula of the Corruptedest. The formulas of the Corruptedest. The formula of the Corruptedest. The equation of the Corruptedest. The equations of the Corruptedest. The equation of the Corruptedest. The theory of the Corruptedest. The theories of the Corruptedest. The theory of the Corruptedest. The symbol of the Corruptedest. The symbols of the Corruptedest. The symbol of the Corruptedest. The color of the Corruptedest. The colors of the Corruptedest. The color of the Corruptedest. The thing of the Corruptedest. The things of the Corruptedest. The thing of the Corruptedest. The way of the Corruptedest. The ways of the Corruptedest. The way of the Corruptedest. The place of the Corruptedest. The places of the Corruptedest. The place of the Corruptedest. The time of the Corruptedest. The times of the Corruptedest. The time of the Corruptedest. The event of the Corruptedest. The events of the Corruptedest. The event of the Corruptedest. The result of the Corruptedest. The results of the Corruptedest. The result of the Corruptedest. The crown of the Corruptedest. The crowns of the Corruptedest. The crown of the Corruptedest. The throne of the Corruptedest. The thrones of the Corruptedest. The throne of the Corruptedest. The Corruptedest king. The Corruptedest kings. The Corruptedest kingdom. The Corruptedest kingdoms. The Corruptedest king subject. The Corruptedest king subjects. The Corruptedest king's dominion. The Corruptedest king's dominions. The kingdom of the Corruptedest. The kingdoms of the Corruptedest. The kingdom of the Corruptedest. The Corruptedest queen. The Corruptedest queens. The Corruptedest queendom. The Corruptedest queendoms. The Corruptedest queen subject. The Corruptedest queen subjects. The Corruptedest queen's dominion. The Corruptedest queen's dominions. The queendom of the Corruptedest. The queendoms of the Corruptedest. The queendom of the Corruptedest. The Corruptedest prince. The Corruptedest princes. The Corruptedest princedom. The Corruptedest princedoms. The Corruptedest princes subject. The Corruptedest princes subjects. The Corruptedest prince's dominion. The Corruptedest prince's dominions. The princedom of the Corruptedest. The princedoms of the Corruptedest. The princedom of the Corruptedest. The Corruptedest princess. The Corruptedest princesses. The Corruptedest princessdom. The Corruptedest princessdoms. The Corruptedest princesses subject. The Corruptedest princesses subjects. The Corruptedest princesses dominion. The Corruptedest princesses dominions. The princessdom of the Corruptedest. The princessdoms of the Corruptedest. The princessdom of the Corruptedest. The lord of the Corruptedest. The lords of the Corruptedest. The lord of the Corruptedest. The lordess of the Corruptedest. The lordesses of the Corruptedest. The lordess of the Corruptedest. The priest of the Corruptedest. The priests of the Corruptedest. The priest of the Corruptedest. The priestess of the Corruptedest. The priestesses of the Corruptedest. The priestess of the Corruptedest. The ritual of the Corruptedest. The rituals of the Corruptedest. The ritual of the Corruptedest. The shrine of the Corruptedest. The shrines of the Corruptedest. The shrine of the Corruptedest. The temple of the Corruptedest. The temples of the Corruptedest. The temple of the Corruptedest. The leader of the Corruptedest. The leaders of the Corruptedest. The leader of the Corruptedest. The follower of the Corruptedest. The followers of the Corruptedest. The follower of the Corruptedest. The natural substance of the Corruptedest. The natural substances of the Corruptedest. The natural substance of the Corruptedest. The supernatural substance of the Corruptedest. The supernatural substances of the Corruptedest. The supernatural substance of the Corruptedest. The temporal substance of the Corruptedest. The temporal substances of the Corruptedest. The temporal substance of the Corruptedest. The spiritual substance of the Corruptedest. The spiritual substances of the Corruptedest. The spiritual substance of the Corruptedest. The natural form of the Corruptedest. The natural forms of the Corruptedest. The natural form of the Corruptedest. The supernatural form of the Corruptedest. The supernatural forms of the Corruptedest. The supernatural form of the Corruptedest. The temporal form of the Corruptedest. The temporal forms of the Corruptedest. The temporal form of the Corruptedest. The spiritual form of the Corruptedest. The spiritual forms of the Corruptedest. The spiritual form of the Corruptedest. The age of the Corruptedest. The ages of the Corruptedest. The age of the Corruptedest. The era of the Corruptedest. The eras of the Corruptedest. The era of the Corruptedest. The awakener of the Corruptedest. The awakeners of the Corruptedest. The awakener of the Corruptedest. The awakening of the Corruptedest. The awakenings of the Corruptedest. The awakening of the Corruptedest. The realm of the Corruptedest. The realms of the Corruptedest. The realm of the Corruptedest. The dimension of the Corruptedest. The dimensions of the Corruptedest. The dimension of the Corruptedest. The zone of the Corruptedest. The zones of the Corruptedest. The zone of the Corruptedest. The frequency of the Corruptedest. The frequencies of the Corruptedest. The frequency of the Corruptedest. The century of the Corruptedest. The centuries of the Corruptedest. The century of the Corruptedest. The millennium of the Corruptedest. The millenniums of the Corruptedest. The millennium of the Corruptedest. The purpose of the Corruptedest. The purposes of the Corruptedest. The purpose of the Corruptedest. The meaning of the Corruptedest. The meanings of the Corruptedest. The meaning of the Corruptedest. The culture of the Corruptedest. The cultures of the Corruptedest. The culture of the Corruptedest. The demonstrator of the Corruptedest. The demonstrators of the Corruptedest. The demonstrator of the Corruptedest. The demonstration of the Corruptedest. The demonstrations of the Corruptedest. The demonstration of the Corruptedest. The manifester of the Corruptedest. The manifestors of the Corruptedest. The manifester of the Corruptedest. The manifestation of the Corruptedest. The manifestations of the Corruptedest. The manifestation of the Corruptedest. The presence of the Corruptedest. The presences of the Corruptedest. The presence of the Corruptedest. The glow of the Corruptedest. The glows of the Corruptedest. The glow of the Corruptedest. The goal of the Corruptedest. The goals of the Corruptedest. The goal of the Corruptedest. The plan of the Corruptedest. The plans of the Corruptedest. The plan of the Corruptedest. The book of the Corruptedest. The books of the Corruptedest. The book of the Corruptedest. The philosopher of the Corruptedest. The philosophers of the Corruptedest. The philosopher of the Corruptedest. The philosophy of the Corruptedest. The philosophies of the Corruptedest. The philosophy of the Corruptedest. The releaser of the Corruptedest. The releasers of the Corruptedest. The releaser of the Corruptedest. The release of the Corruptedest. The releases of the Corruptedest. The release of the Corruptedest. The variable of the Corruptedest. The variables of the Corruptedest. The variable of the Corruptedest. The cause of the Corruptedest. The causes of the Corruptedest. The cause of the Corruptedest. The effect of the Corruptedest. The effects of the Corruptedest. The effect of the Corruptedest. The journey of the Corruptedest. The journeys of the Corruptedest. The journey of the Corruptedest. The emergence of the Corruptedest. The emergences of the corruptedest. The emergence of the corruptedest. The source of the corruptedest. The sources of the corruptedest. The source of the corruptedest. The originator of the corruptedest. The originators of the corruptedest. The originator of the corruptedest. The origin of the corruptedest. The origins of the corruptedest. The origin of the corruptedest. The forefather of the corruptedest. The forefathers of the corruptedest. The forefather of the corruptedest. The foremother of the corruptedest. The foremothers of the corruptedest. The foremother of the corruptedest. The ancestor of the corruptedest. The ancestors of the corruptedest. The ancestor of the corruptedest. The descendant of the corruptedest. The descendants of the corruptedest. The descendant of the corruptedest. The lineage of the corruptedest. The lineages of the corruptedest. The lineage of the corruptedest. The heritage of the corruptedest. The heritages of the corruptedest. The heritage of the corruptedest. The heir of the corruptedest. The heirs of the corruptedest. The heir of the corruptedest. The co-heir of the corruptedest. The co-heirs of the corruptedest. The co-heir of the corruptedest. The joint heir of the corruptedest. The joint heirs of the corruptedest. The joint heir of the corruptedest. The dynasty of the corruptedest. The dynasties of the corruptedest. The dynasty of the corruptedest. The force of the corruptedest. The forces of the corruptedest. The force of the corruptedest. The law of the corruptedest. The laws of the corruptedest. The law of the corruptedest. The pact of the corruptedest. The pacts of the corruptedest. The pact of the corruptedest. The game of the corruptedest. The games of the corruptedest. The game of the corruptedest. The mask of the corruptedest. The masks of the corruptedest. The mask of the corruptedest. The armor of the corruptedest. The armors of the corruptedest. The armor of the corruptedest. The sword of the corruptedest. The swords of the corruptedest. The sword of the corruptedest. The shield of the corruptedest. The shields of the corruptedest. The shield of the corruptedest. The force shield of the corruptedest. The force shields of the corruptedest. The force shield of the corruptedest. The armored force shield of the corruptedest. The armored force shields of the corruptedest. The armored force shield of the corruptedest. The champion of the corruptedest. The champions of the corruptedest. The champion of the corruptedest. The guardian of the corruptedest. The guardians of the corruptedest. The guardian of the corruptedest. The defender of the corruptedest. The defenders of the corruptedest. The defender of the corruptedest. The protector of the corruptedest. The protectors of the corruptedest. The protector of the corruptedest. The chant of the corruptedest. The chants of the corruptedest. The chant of the corruptedest. The shape of the corruptedest. The shapes of the corruptedest. The shape of the corruptedest. The cube of the corruptedest. The cubes of the corruptedest. The cube of the corruptedest. The cuboid of the corruptedest. The cuboids of the corruptedest. The cuboid of the corruptedest. The sphere of the corruptedest. The spheres of the corruptedest. The sphere of the corruptedest. The spheroid of the corruptedest. The spheroids of the corruptedest. The spheroid of the corruptedest. The prism of the corruptedest. The prisms of the corruptedest. The prism of the corruptedest. The pyramid of the corruptedest. The pyramids of the corruptedest. The pyramid of the corruptedest. The cylinder of the corruptedest. The cylinders of the corruptedest. The cylinder of the corruptedest. The cone of the corruptedest. The cones of the corruptedest. The cone of the corruptedest. The triangle of the corruptedest. The triangles of the corruptedest. The triangle of the corruptedest. The circle of the corruptedest. The circles of the corruptedest. The circle of the corruptedest. The semicircle of the corruptedest. The semicircles of the corruptedest. The semicircle of the corruptedest. The square of the corruptedest. The squares of the corruptedest. The square of the corruptedest. The rectangle of the corruptedest. The rectangles of the corruptedest. The rectangle of the corruptedest. The parallelogram of the corruptedest. The parallelograms of the Corruptedest. The parallelogram of the Corruptedest. The rhombus of the Corruptedest. The rhombuses of the Corruptedest. The rhombus of the Corruptedest. The trapezoid of the Corruptedest. The trapezoids of the Corruptedest. The trapezoid of the Corruptedest. The polygon of the Corruptedest. The polygons of the Corruptedest. The polygon of the Corruptedest. The pentagon of the Corruptedest. The pentagons of the Corruptedest. The pentagon of the Corruptedest. The hexagon of the Corruptedest. The hexagons of the Corruptedest. The hexagon of the Corruptedest. The septagon of the Corruptedest. The septagons of the Corruptedest. The septagon of the Corruptedest. The octagon of the Corruptedest. The octagons of the Corruptedest. The octagon of the Corruptedest. The nonagon of the Corruptedest. The nonagons of the Corruptedest. The nonagon of the Corruptedest. The decagon of the Corruptedest. The decagons of the Corruptedest. The decagon of the Corruptedest. The evolution of the Corruptedest. The evolutions of the Corruptedest. The evolution of the Corruptedest. The revolution of the Corruptedest. The revolutions of the Corruptedest. The revolution of the Corruptedest. The elemental art of the Corruptedest. The elemental arts of the Corruptedest. The elemental art of the Corruptedest. The elemental science of the Corruptedest. The elemental sciences of the Corruptedest. The elemental science of the Corruptedest. The elemental principle of the Corruptedest. The elemental principles of the Corruptedest. The elemental principle of the Corruptedest. The elemental technology of the Corruptedest. The elemental technologies of the Corruptedest. The elemental technology of the Corruptedest. The low elemental art of the Corruptedest. The low elemental arts of the Corruptedest. The low elemental art of the Corruptedest. The low elemental science of the Corruptedest. The low elemental sciences of the Corruptedest. The low elemental science of the Corruptedest. The low elemental principle of the Corruptedest. The low elemental principles of the Corruptedest. The low elemental principle of the Corruptedest. The low elemental technology of the Corruptedest. The low elemental technologies of the Corruptedest. The low elemental technology of the Corruptedest. The high elemental art of the Corruptedest. The high elemental arts of the Corruptedest. The high elemental art of the Corruptedest. The high elemental science of the Corruptedest. The high elemental sciences of the Corruptedest. The high elemental science of the Corruptedest. The high elemental principle of the Corruptedest. The high elemental principles of the Corruptedest. The high elemental principle of the Corruptedest. The high elemental technology of the Corruptedest. The high elemental technologies of the Corruptedest. The high elemental technology of the Corruptedest. The agent of the Corruptedest. The agents of the Corruptedest. The agent of the Corruptedest. The agency of the Corruptedest. The agencies of the Corruptedest. The agency of the Corruptedest. The amplifier of the Corruptedest. The amplifiers of the Corruptedest. The amplifier of the Corruptedest. The amplification of the Corruptedest. The amplifications of the Corruptedest. The amplification of the Corruptedest. The enhancer of the Corruptedest. The enhancers of the Corruptedest. The enhancer of the Corruptedest. The enhancement of the Corruptedest. The enhancements of the Corruptedest. The enhancement of the Corruptedest. The magnifier of the Corruptedest. The magnifiers of the Corruptedest. The magnifier of the Corruptedest. The magnification of the Corruptedest. The magnifications of the Corruptedest. The magnification of the Corruptedest. The influencer of the Corruptedest. The influencers of the Corruptedest. The influencer of the Corruptedest. The influence of the Corruptedest. The influences of the Corruptedest. The influence of the Corruptedest. The emanator of the Corruptedest. The emanators of the Corruptedest. The emanator of the Corruptedest. The emanation of the Corruptedest. The emanations of the Corruptedest. The emanation of the Corruptedest. The converger of the Corruptedest. The convergers of the Corruptedest. The converger of the Corruptedest. The convergence of the Corruptedest. The convergences of the Corruptedest. The convergence of the Corruptedest. The aura of the Corruptedest. The auras of the Corruptedest. The aura of the Corruptedest. The impression of the Corruptedest. The impressions of the Corruptedest. The impression of the Corruptedest. The intelligence of the Corruptedest. The intelligences of the Corruptedest. The intelligence of the Corruptedest. The sophistication of the Corruptedest. The sophistications of the Corruptedest. The sophistication of the Corruptedest. The genius of the Corruptedest. The geniuses of the Corruptedest. The genius of the Corruptedest. The polymath of the Corruptedest. The polymaths of the Corruptedest. The polymath of the Corruptedest. The psychic of the Corruptedest. The psychics of the Corruptedest. The psychic of the Corruptedest. The knowledge of the Corruptedest. The knowledges of the Corruptedest. The knowledge of the Corruptedest. The understanding of the Corruptedest. The understandings of the Corruptedest. The understanding of the Corruptedest. The wisdom of the Corruptedest. The wisdoms of the Corruptedest. The wisdom of the Corruptedest. The secret of the Corruptedest. The secrets of the Corruptedest. The secret of the Corruptedest. The mystery of the Corruptedest. The mysteries of the Corruptedest. The mystery of the Corruptedest. The revelation of the Corruptedest. The revelations of the Corruptedest. The revelation of the Corruptedest. The tactic of the Corruptedest. The tactics of the Corruptedest. The tactic of the Corruptedest. The strategy of the Corruptedest. The strategies of the Corruptedest. The strategy of the Corruptedest. The strength of the Corruptedest. The strengths of the Corruptedest. The strength of the Corruptedest. The might of the Corruptedest. The mights of the Corruptedest. The might of the Corruptedest. The power of the Corruptedest. The powers of the Corruptedest. The power of the Corruptedest. The authority of the Corruptedest. The authorities of the Corruptedest. The authority of the Corruptedest. The dominion of the Corruptedest. The dominions of the Corruptedest. The dominion of the Corruptedest. The rhythm of the Corruptedest. The rhythms of the Corruptedest. The rhythm of the Corruptedest. The melody of the Corruptedest. The melodies of the Corruptedest. The melody of the Corruptedest. The music of the Corruptedest. The musics of the Corruptedest. The music of the Corruptedest. The lyric of the Corruptedest. The lyrics of the Corruptedest. The lyric of the Corruptedest. The song of the Corruptedest. The songs of the Corruptedest. The song of the Corruptedest. The dance of the Corruptedest. The dances of the Corruptedest. The dance of the Corruptedest. The spirit of the Corruptedest. The spirits of the Corruptedest. The spirit of the Corruptedest. The soul of the Corruptedest. The souls of the Corruptedest. The soul of the Corruptedest. The body of the Corruptedest. The bodies of the Corruptedest. The body of the Corruptedest. The mark of the Corruptedest. The marks of the Corruptedest. The mark of the Corruptedest. The promise of the Corruptedest. The promises of the Corruptedest. The promise of the Corruptedest. The visionary of the Corruptedest. The visionaries of the Corruptedest. The visionary of the Corruptedest. The vision of the Corruptedest. The visions of the Corruptedest. The vision of the Corruptedest. The picture of the Corruptedest. The pictures of the Corruptedest. The picture of the Corruptedest. The sound of the Corruptedest. The sounds of the Corruptedest. The sound of the Corruptedest. The tongue of the Corruptedest. The tongues of the Corruptedest. The tongue of the Corruptedest. The language of the Corruptedest. The languages of the Corruptedest. The language of the Corruptedest. The communication of the Corruptedest. The communications of the Corruptedest. The communication of the Corruptedest. The people of the Corruptedest. The peoples of the Corruptedest. The people of the Corruptedest. The society of the Corruptedest. The societies of the Corruptedest. The society of the Corruptedest. The fortress of the Corruptedest. The fortresses of the Corruptedest. The fortress of the Corruptedest. The government of the Corruptedest. The governments of the Corruptedest. the government of the corruptedest, the city of the corruptedest, the cities of the corruptedest, the city of the corruptedest, the nation of the corruptedest, the nations of the corruptedest, the nation of the corruptedest, the civilization of the corruptedest, the civilizations of the corruptedest, the civilization of the corruptedest, the world of the corruptedest, the worlds of the corruptedest, the world of the corruptedest,